Hello. Great to see you. Thank you for coming out. Is that on? Is this thing on?
I don't know.
It is. So I'm here with Manoush, who I love, and
Can we just pause for 1 second? You guys, I have interviewed Brooke on stage so many times. The tables being turned is like this. I'm having a total freak out moment right now. This is okay. I'm good now.
Okay. So this book, Bored and Brilliant, I have to admit I was initially a little suspicious of it because first of all, I love technology, and second of all, I'm very dubious of self-help books. But I don't know why. I know people have really gotten benefit out of them, but anything that more than one person can use, I'm suspicious of. But I have to say, reading through this, there was this cumulative effect. So much so that I was forced to think about how I use technology and what technology makes me miserable and how I am in control of this. So when I finished the book, I disconnected from Facebook. And thank you. Anyway, but
I mean, she didn't just take it off her phone. She quit.
I quit it.
So I'm sorry. You're friends with Brooke on Facebook.
But that's because it gave me spilkus, and I realized I didn't have to anymore. This book is a combination of things, and we will talk about most of them. Actually, I forgot to ask how long this interview is. Can somebody just tell me? Cynthia, are you there?
Yes.
How long is the interview?
45 minutes.
Okay, great. Okay, and plus Q&A or just 45 minutes plus Q&A? Great, okay.
Including Q&A. It's Friday night. Let these people
What's
go.
good for you guys?
Let's see how we do. And if we
Plus,
bore you, then
okay, plus. So then, first of all, let's talk about what boredom is.
Yes.
It was first identified, you note in the book, the word was first used in Bleak House.
Yes. Yeah, okay. Bleak House, Charles Dickens, 1853, the word boredom appears, and you're thinking oh yeah, Industrial Revolution. Makes sense. Factories, right? People have free time. They're chilling. They're getting bored. But actually, what we now realize is there's a big debate amongst the nerdy semantic people who are saying, yeah, but actually the French ennui, isn't that sort of boredom as well? Or Kierkegaard, idle, the way that he used that word was also similar to boredom. Heidegger described the feeling as when people just get mired in trying to figure out their place in the world. And
But
so
you liked Heidegger's.
I like Heidegger's definition a lot. But the point being, boredom means lots and lots of different things to different people. And it can be horrible, but I think it can also be a really wonderful thing. And so that is why I insisted on using the word boredom, despite the fact that many listeners a couple of years ago were like, oh, can we just use something more positive, please, like daydreaming or whatever? And I was like, no, there's the yucky part. We cannot skip the yucky part. Mm-hmm. It is the gateway to all the good stuff. And so I was very adamant about that.
So it's a gateway. The experience of it is miserable. We hate it.
To begin with, yeah.
We medicate ourselves out of it. We, Instagram ourselves out of it, or we Twitter ourselves out of it, or we, in your case, 2-dot ourselves out of it. And you make a big deal of 2 dots. 2 dots seem to stand for everything that was out of whack in your life.
Okay, does anybody play 2 dots here? Are there 2 dots players? Okay. The people who do play are like this. They're like, it's a version of Candy Crush. It's like the Brooklyn version. It's like artisanal pickles, kind of it's beautiful, and it has these crafted bouncing dots, and you connect them, and it's really satisfying. And when you make a square, and the whole thing. Yeah, I am not a gamer, but for some reason I fell in love with this little game on my phone, and it turned into my scotch and soda. I'd put the kids to bed and I'd fire it up, and then hours would go by, and my poor husband, who couldn't come tonight, he'd come into the bedroom and I'd throw the phone under the bed and be like, oh, just relax. I was lying about this game. I was exhibiting a lot of addictive behavior. and I was also ashamed of myself because I was like, I could be learning Spanish finally. Like, what am I doing? So I went on a quest because I thought, well, there might be an escape hatch here in that perhaps it's improving my spatial ability to connect. I'm understanding I don't know, physics better. I was like looking for all sorts of reasons. And the beauty of being a journalist is you get to call the people who actually like know that stuff. And they were like, no, you're just getting better at connecting dots. You are not improving your spatial capability. And as I note in the book, like, you know, Lumosity, people who claim to be making your brains better actually faced a huge lawsuit because they never were able to prove that they were doing anything than making you better at playing the games that you were giving them. So long story short, I took it off my phone.
She took it off her phone for a while and then put it back on her phone.
Brooke, you're ruining the ending of the book.
But tell them
reason.
Tell them how you put it there, what you did.
Okay, so I took it off my phone and nearly cried, and then based one of the challenges in the book on that experience of taking the app on your phone, the one that is driving you bananas, because you all have it. You do. It's that one app that you're like, right? So taking it off really was very freeing in some ways. But then I was talking to my friend, the game designer, Jane McGonigal. She's a futurist, which is like the coolest title in the world. And I was telling her how nervous I was about a really long flight I had to take. And she's like, you know, you could put the game back on. You know, what's the alternative? What are you going to do? Drink your way to Australia? She's like, this is a non-pharmaceutical way of you coping with your very real fear of long flights. Put it back on. See how it goes. And I was like, I don't know. I have an addictive behavior around it. And she's like, I think that's bullshit. Like, I think you need to tell yourself that you can handle it in the right scenarios. That if somebody was calling for help, you would put 2 dots down. It would be okay. And so, I now have 2 versions of 2 dots on my phone, but I have very strict rules around it. When I'm on a flight, it's unlimited play. When I am not on a flight, I am allowed to play through my lives. There aren't that many, and then that's it. And I don't feel guilty. It is pathetic, but it's my personal pathetic.
No,
and I'm sticking to it, Brooke. And there's science behind it, because the other thing that Jane told me is that there's doing a lot of research into how games can help people. So, for example, if you are trying not to overeat or you are trying to quit smoking, set your timer for 10 minutes. That's actually a great way to sort of change your mindset, change your track. If you are looking for you've had a very long day and you're finding it very difficult to unwind, set the timer for 5 minutes. There's research into ways that we can use games more productively, not as escape hatches. And she said something very powerful to me, which was what she hates is when parents are like, put the game away. What are you doing? You're wasting your time. And was saying, no, what you're saying to a kid if you say that is, I don't respect what you value. Why not say to your child, what are you learning? What kind of skills, mental skills are you getting out of playing this game? So I did, I love to practice on my kids. So we talked about like Space Invader. She's like, I killed the aliens. I was like, yes, but how much focus did that require to do that? And he totally was into it. He's like, yeah, actually, it was a lot of focus. And he started talking about real world skills. And then when I was like, okay, so let's go do something else, he didn't feel like he had to, battle me against it. We reached a conclusion.
Now, there are 2 words in this book, bored and brilliant. Yes. And you contend science. I love science. I wish science were here right now. I would give him a piece of my mind. I'm short to him. But anyway, so science tells you that in order that without these spaces that you can't fill, and that the default mode up until recently was that half your waking hours was that state of just...
Yes. Okay. This is the good stuff, right? Okay, so I had this epiphany, I don't know, was it an epiphany? Yeah, it was an epiphany. So I had this moment a couple years ago where I was, the show was doing well, but I was like, why aren't we doing really well? And I was really struggling to come up with good ideas, and I sort of was like, when was the last time I had my best ideas? And it was such a cliche, because cliches are true, right? That's why they're cliches. It was before I had kids and I took long showers, or when I would wait for the subway and I wouldn't check the headlines, or when I would stand in line for my coffee and not refresh Twitter obsessively. And it was
Why
those-
didn't you? Because you
I
didn't
didn't
have a phone.
Yeah, like didn't have a choice. Like those were your cracks in your day, and you took them as they came. And then now, anytime you're like, spare moment, you know, it's you fill it. And so that was what led me to sort of question, like, what does happen in our brains when we get bored? And more importantly, what could be happening to us if we never get bored, if we get rid of this human state entirely? And what I discovered was, like, we're at an extremely exciting moment for neuroscience, where they're starting to understand what is happening when our minds wander. And they know now that there's a network in your brain called the default mode, where this is where you do some of your most original thinking, your best problem solving. It is when you're folding the laundry and you're not concentrating physically, or you are actually lounging on the couch and not watching Game of Thrones and tweeting about it at the same time. I know, hard to imagine. And so in the default mode, we also do something called autobiographical planning, which I had never heard of, which is this idea that you look back on your life and you take note of the most amazing moments or the worst moments, and you build a personal narrative, and then you look forward and you set goals and you figure out ways to get to them. And I was like, damn, those are really important things. If there's an entire generation of people who are not doing this, that seems a little worrying. So
Is that the brilliant part?
no.
Is there more to it?
There is. The default mode's like the bridge, right? And then I think we need to redefine what brilliance is, what creativity is. I just think, like, we're at least in my field, which is covering technology, we define brilliance as founding a company that has a 10x exit, right? Fuck that. Brilliance can be anything. It can be helping your kid make friends because they just started school and they are terrified and it's day 2 today. Who had dealt with that this week, right? I did. You can't hear? Okay. Brilliance can be figuring out what you're going to cook with the leftovers that are left in your kitchen. It can be figuring out a way to talk to that colleague of yours who you just don't ever seem to be on the same wavelength. Like, these are... It's more than just writing the perfect email. It's the problem solving part. And so I think brilliance is like the little bits of glitter in your day where something sort of, you have a connection or you do something that you didn't expect, right?
But to get there, you have to go through boredom, which is nauseating.
That was my favorite book in high school, Nausea.
Well, but this is the thing, is that you offer in here 7 challenges that you, when you did this project a couple of years ago, 20,000 people plus a bunch of classes, high school, college too, I think, they all signed on. So it was a nice chunk of data.
Yeah.
And
Can we ask, did anybody here do Boredom Brilliant 2 years ago? Oh, you did?
oh wow, that's
Awesome. Your
great.
stories might be in the book.
Oh,
which
that's
is cool.
fantastic. So you've talked about one of the challenges about get rid of an app day.
Yeah.
It was 7 days, a challenge every day. So let's start with day 1, talk about the challenge, why it was chosen, what it was supposed to do.
Okay, so first time around, I gotta say, I was making it up as we went. I was like, I don't know, maybe this will work. Let's see how it goes. I've got these 20,000 people who are willing to play with me. And what's different is 2 years later, I took all their feedback. I think this is the first book to come from a crowdsourced podcast project, which is kind of cool. So I took the feedback and I codified sort of the plan, and like some of it didn't work that well, and I made changes. So day 1 is observe yourself. The idea being that you are essentially doing a self-experimentation, and so you need your baseline. And so what we also learned was that observing yourself analog style doesn't really work, because when people estimate how many times a day they pick up their phone or how many minutes a day they spend on their phone, they vastly underestimate. So we partnered with apps, ironically, to help people measure the time that they spent on their phones,
And
how many times
they can
picked
find
it up.
it in here if
Yes,
they want to
they
use
can.
it. Okay.
And yeah, they can find that. Or, you can observe yourself in another way. So for example, I figured I was checking my phone like, 15 times a day seemed reasonable. No, 90 times a day. And what I realized was that had become like just a reflex. Like I walk in the elevator, I check my phone. I walk out of the elevator, I check my phone. And so to see the hard data was extremely scary, but also showed that we that sense of like being worried that this was an issue for me was actually spot on.
And what were the numbers you got? And before you tell us, if there's anybody who's tired, these people have not come.
Yeah,
so we have
F 'em,
two
Brain.
seats
Come
right
sit down
here.
in the front.
You
We
know.
would love to see you. We're not. That's fine. Yay! I love people who are
Just,
like,
you know,
long week.
one of them is our boss. He's not here. Forget it.
I know. I texted with them
The
too.
other one, I don't know who that
That's
is.
my speaking agent.
Oh, okay. Well, sit here, move the signs or sit on them, whatever you
and
want.
Oh my God, she's
Yeah.
injured.
Oh my
like,
God.
yes.
Anybody else? Anybody else
With
with,
a
a
cast
bum
on their
leg
foot?
who wants to sit down? Okay, that makes me feel better. There's still another one. You don't have to be disabled.
Yay.
Okay, good. All right. Now, how many numbers what were the numbers?
The numbers were, on average, and I would say that this is a self-selecting group, people who felt that this was an issue for them. So I think it's lower than the general
And
population.
I think it's higher.
No, you're
because
wrong
they
about
thought
that.
it was an issue.
No.
All right.
2 hours a day on average, and on average between 60 and 90 pickups a day. But I would
Okay.
say the average American in the United States today spends 3 hours a day on their smartphone, 11 hours a day
Oh.
in front of a screen.
I am so wrong.
You are wrong, sister.
You know, but it's understandable because of, you wrote in the book, I keep talking about how horrible boredom is. Boredom is terrifying for me. Almost every decision I've made has been a flight from boredom, but
But look where she ended up, right? So-
you said, you wrote in the book about a study at the University of Virginia, I guess, where, people don't like to give themselves shocks, right?
Well.
But this is what was staggering to me.
Yeah, so these researchers that Brooke's referring to at the University of Virginia, Tim Wilson, lovely man, also slightly sadistic, I think. Anyway, he built a room, like they made it as boring as possible, gray walls, bland furniture, and they asked people to come in there and they showed them, they're like, you could either shock yourself or you could just sit here and think. Totally your call. See you later. And people shock themselves rather than just sit there and think, which is, one guy did it 150 times. Like, at some point, it's a fetish.
But
at some point.
I think it doesn't even have to be. As you know, novelty releases a shot of dopamine.
Yeah.
That's pleasurable. It's also called the mother of invention, but I guess it depends the context in which it is dispensed. Coke addicts, we have a limited amount of dopamine, it turns out, at least for a long time. So Coke addicts who get that shot over and over again, they run out of it and they droop. They become depressed. And you can use your dopamine on, Twitter or Two Dots or Words
Right.
with Friends in my case, or you can use it on, or shocking yourself, or you can use it on something good. But when you think about how much dopamine you've got and how much that can contribute to creativity, and you realize that there's a there's a window, and you need to consider that the window can close.
Yeah, that was what I found so powerful. And like you were talking about some of the students that did it. I had like this one kid who was like, this feels weird. I don't think I like it. I don't recognize this emotion. And I was like, what, like boredom? Like you've never felt bored? And he was like, I don't think so. Because if you think about it, if you're 16 or 17 and you've always had a smartphone, you've never had to be bored. And one of the teachers who did the project in his classroom said to me, he was like, what I think they realized more even than just getting off their smartphones was how mediated their entire day is by screens, in terms of they have iPads in the classroom, they have smart boards that they're looking at. And when we took that away or mitigated it, they started having more eye contact. And it was almost like, it sounded ridiculous, like, oh, great, more eye contact. But No, eye contact is really important in terms of empathy and understanding your fellow students and learning and all of these other sorts of ways that we gather information, not just from text or photos on a screen. And so for him, it was like a huge breakthrough. Day 2, though, those kids hated, or day 3, challenge 3, which was no photo day. Because also, if you're 16 or 17, you are basically more or less communicating with your peers via selfies all day long, essentially. So, like Snapchat. Do you guys do Snapchat? You do? Oh, you look very young. No, I'm just kidding. He's slinking away. No, but like I like Twitter. I don't know. I like words, but that was interesting to me that for them, and the way, of course, that Snapchat makes money is not, we don't pay for Snapchat, right? They develop things like Snapchat streaks, the idea that they get kids to send each other a selfie every single morning. They get points for those sending each other selfies. They get emoji trophies, and then it becomes a thing in high school, like, don't break the streak, because if you break the streak, if you stop sending each other selfies, it means that, like, you are hate each other or something. It's
right,
like an
and there's a strain in the book. There are a number of things that are gone over: the history, the nature of boredom, the definition of brilliance, the way that the companies use your physiology to keep you there, so that they can deliver you to their advertisers. And when it comes to pictures, it's complicated, like everything is, because you quote experts in the book who say one picture, it isn't just a picture of your breakfast. You do it enough, and you're offering a picture of your life. And then, I think about people in museums who, I go to them a lot, and you see people looking at pictures through their cameras, they haven't even spent a second looking at the picture. They're documenting the moment before they've experienced it. We've all seen it. And you said, fascinatingly, that research has shown that there is a way to use your camera in the museum that can capture the experience. It's just not the way you've used it before.
Yeah, so this is a researcher at Fairfield University. She calls it the photo-taking impairment effect, that basically, you've probably sensed this. Well, a researcher has proven it, that when you are constantly taking photos, you're outsourcing your memory to your camera, right? But sometimes that's great. Like, if you're parked in, section D13 and you're never going to remember that, great. Then use your camera to do it. Use it as a tool, right? But what she's also found is the way to take photos that enhances your memory is to actually take a picture of a very specific detail, something that really you notice and speaks to you, and you take a picture of the detail and it kind of imprints a memory. So to me, I was like, well, that's cool. Let's just make these tweaks. We can continue to use our phones in the wonderful ways that they connect us in so many ways, but why not be a little bit more purposeful about how we use them so that they help us improve our lives, as opposed to sort of suck it away. And I think I have 8,000 photos on my phone that need to be uploaded somewhere that I don't even check. And it's kind of not good enough is what I feel like.
Day 4.
Oh, what's day 4? Oh, vacation. I love vacations. Okay, so this is like the work chapter where we really talk about this idea. There's a wonderful researcher at UC Irvine who has studied this and says that people at work these days are changing, on average, switching tasks 566 times a day. And so when we question this nation's sort of productivity, I think a lot of it comes down to switch, and not doing the sort of deep work.
Tell them
what
about,
to do?
Tell
Vacation.
them about self-interruption.
Oh, self-interruption. You love self-interruption. Okay, one thing that she learned was that
I have ADD.
If you have an hour at work where you're constantly being interrupted by email or pings and people stopping by your desk, the next hour, even if nobody is interrupting you, you will begin to interrupt yourself, which I think is kind of hilarious. Like, how ridiculous is that? So it's these patterns we get, and that, I think, to me explained why at night I was going scrolling like this and not even reading what I was doing. It's like, if you're doing it all day, you just sort of lull yourself into this way of being. In any case, though, vacation, out of office, even for half an hour, resetting the expectations of the people on the other side, not just for you, but for them, so that they stop harassing you and understand that you are trying to do some deep work and respect that that's what you are trying to do.
And basically putting on your phone, unavailable between 3 and 5 or 2 and 2:15, whatever you can manage.
Or, I have had people say to me, my boss is never going to go for that. I'm like, stomach virus. You have a stomach. No one will question whether you have a stomach virus. Just even for an hour. You just need to, lie down.
Or just tell them that whoever contacts you, you're going to tell them about your cleanse. And they won't call. So 5.
5. Day 5. God, what the hell is day 5? I don't remember.
It's okay.
There's,
I've
no,
got this
day
book
5
with
is
things in it.
notice something.
Oh, notice
Yes,
something.
notice something. Is that day 5? Yeah, notice something. Notice something is lovely because I got this from talking to another futurist. There are lots of them, oddly. Rita King. Her job is to think of what life will be like 100, 200 years from now for movie companies, so that they can create, a town or a family. How would they live? And her whole thing is she doesn't start with the concept of how they're living. She goes and observes tiny little details. So what would the sleeve of a sweater look like 100 years from now? And so her idea is just go and notice the tiniest little detail of something. And then as I looked further into this, of course, Joan Didion, Gary Steingart, they all are taking their notebooks and just going and being in places and finding one other thing, which also relates, I think, back to boredom and the default mode, because in the default mode, the other thing that happens is you imagine yourself to be someone else. What is someone thinking? How are they feeling right now on the subway? You look at them, and that's where empathy comes from, right? Is you're like, oh, she looks like she had a hard day. Not you. You look like you actually look refreshed. But this idea that you put yourself in that other person's shoes, your mind wanders and you start to imagine something that they're feeling. And I guess I just feel like, God, we could use a lot of that right now. This country's in a not terribly empathetic place, and so maybe we need to not call it boredom and just tell people to ignite their default mode more often, and people will get more into this idea of feeling empathy for each other, and also back to the creativity and the problem solving part. I mean, that's what it's going to take, right? If we are going to solve some of the huge issues that we're dealing with right now, economic disparity, racial inequality, the environment, we need this next generation to do some seriously deep thinking. And Instagram's great, but not all the time.
Initially I sort of glossed over the notice something thing because it has a sort of
Self-helpy vibe. Go ahead, Brooke. It's okay.
But-
I could take it.
but
I
if
love
you-
self-help, by the way.
But if you think about the experience of it, you don't just notice something. You don't just say, oh, that person looks tired, or that flower is wilted, or looks like it's really going to rain. You can't ever stay there. We're not wired to stay there. So just taking a moment to notice almost jumpstarts the imagination. As you said, you look at someone, then you can try and imagine what they're thinking or who they are. And I do this on the subway a lot. I have a couple of games I play. I don't know. I have a feeling maybe a lot of people do, that game where you're trapped in the car forever in the twilight zone, and who becomes the leader, and who gets eaten first, and where do you go to the bathroom? That whole thing. Everybody has that, right? Anyway, let's go on to day 6.
Yes, let's go on to day 6. I think that's the last one, actually.
Oh,
I
day
think
7.
well,
You didn't do day
what
7.
did I skip? You're
All
killing
right.
me here. I skipped something extremely important. I don't remember. Let's do the last one. The
Yeah.
last one is brutal but wonderful, and it and it works. So what we ask you to do at the end is to write down something that's been just bugging you, right? It could be anything. It could be that and this was a true problem of mine. What first world problems? What formation of couch is going to fit in my damn narrow living room? This was just plaguing me. Okay, so that one could be one. Or it could be how am I going to afford to pay for my kid to go to school? It could be anything. Write it down. Don't tell anybody. put it aside. And then, this is kind of cruel, but
Well, this is the total immersion part.
this is the total immersion part. Watch a big pot of water come to a boil. Like
Like a spaghetti pot.
oh, well, that's cruel. I was thinking more boiled eggs. In any case, whatever you need to do, we know that it works. We had people do this the first time around, and I think it's that you're looking, you're watching. Is it boiling yet? Is it boiling yet? No, it's not boiling yet. Okay. And then your mind just starts to work on it, right? And it's going to go to other places, and some of them are going to be yucky, but some of them are going to be good. And because it's timed and because you have an end point, and that's what I find so interesting about this, Brooke, is that what we found was that people were saying, like, what you're basically telling me to think? Yeah, it's not rocket science, but what people seem to want is structured specifics. They want to know exactly how to try it. They want to understand the science behind it. They want data for it. And I think if we can help people reconceptualize how being bored or spacing out or thinking works in their lives, if they can understand that it actually is extremely productive, more productive than answering all the emails that are waiting for you, then I think we could sort of have it come back in our lives in some way. And some of us need proof, and so that's what we have here.
Let's widen this out just a little bit, because you talked about how it makes you more productive. And I haven't done the steps, but I will take
next.
that on
I'm going to
faith.
make you. Okay.
But there's this other part, which when you talk about all the things that relate to being bored, and noticing, and the steps, and waiting, and watching, and being in the moment, and mindfulness, or not mindfulness,
Right.
the opposite of it. You know, there's these different kinds of meditation. There's the kind where you say your mantra and don't let your mind wander. You
Right.
just go
Which
back
is
to the
different.
one thing to lessen the noise in your head. And then there's the other kind where you are supposed to go places. And then there's a kind of boredom that you yourself note in the book can be terribly negative, ruminative. You can become obsessed. It can make you feel worse. There's stuff that can make you feel better. And there isn't any way, at least in the initial stages, to control any of that stuff. Is there?
I think there is, because what I think is that the more we understand how our brains work and our technology, how it's been designed to make us do certain things, the more that knowledge is power.
The minute you're not distracted, fundamentally, you're left with yourself.
Yes.
And there isn't anybody else, unless you have a guru leading you through meditation, in which case you're no longer bored. You're in a process.
That's right.
You are left with yourself. And that raises, inevitably, certain spiritual questions, like, who am I? What is happiness? What are my goals? Do I need them? How do I want to spend the rest of my life? Am I impossibly flawed? Whatever comes into your mind, all of that is present or potentially present. I mean, if you're a generally happy, optimistic, upbeat person, maybe you won't be ruminative.
Maybe.
And you won't obsess over something that you did or that somebody did to you. But if you have problems with that, this can be painful or maybe scary, potentially worse than just being endlessly distracted. So there is a risk, but the gain is understanding what you're supposed to do in life or what you want to do. Maybe not be productive.
I mean, you're reminding me actually of a mutual friend of ours who, I don't know if he's here, if Guy Winch is here. This is a psychologist who was showing me actually that he's prototyping a game that helps people with ruminating, that helps them measure how long they're spending on ruminating and then end it. So, I mean, look, technology can help us with so many things. It is wonderful. But at the end of the day, as you say, there's only one place right now where we are left alone until the chip comes. And it is coming, I'm sure. But until then, And I think to me, Brooke, like for some of us, this isn't, a huge breakthrough. But what we're talking about, especially with younger people, is an entire generation that doesn't know what it's like to be alone or to have a thought that they don't share. And that is what they told me. I don't know how to be alone. I don't know how to sit and think through a problem. I've never had to do it. This feels very uncomfortable. But the number of stories that we had of the sort of very personal breakthroughs that they have, and they don't have to be huge. I think they can just be, if there's a teenager who can now be alone with themselves, that to me is like, that's pretty huge and will serve them well going forward when they face personal problems as they go into adulthood. That's a very human thing that we have to teach kids. It's self-regulation. It's being comfortable with uncomfortable thoughts. It's thinking through a problem and knowing when it's mediocre and not worth sharing, and thinking about it till you got it to a place where it is worth sharing, and not just being reactive and spouting your opinion like certain people on Twitter, like our president, are doing. I mean, that the sort of role model that we're showing is that it's okay to say whatever comes into your mind immediately. And I think we have to, if it takes showing why that's not a great thing and they need proof, which absolutely, then there it is.
Anna, just to get people a little riled up before the Q&A.
Oh God, okay.
Just, it's, you observe in the book that it is only the tech industry and the drug business that refer to their customers as users. And tell the assemblage here about the Waldorf School.
Oh, yeah. So do you guys know Waldorf schools? It's based on German sort of philosophy that kids should be in nature as much as possible and using natural tools to create their own things. The school doesn't allow any screens until 7th grade. And in Silicon Valley, it's like one of the places where all the techies send their kids.
People from Facebook, Apple, Google, Hewlett-Packard, they all send their kids there.
So you kind of have to wonder, like, it's okay for the rest of us, but it's not okay for your flesh and blood to be spending time with all of this? Or as Steve Jobs famously retorted when a reporter asked him, what do your kids think of the iPad? He's like, oh, they're not allowed to play on the iPad. And you have to, like, oh, but my kids are? Like, what? So, yeah, I mean, and Nir Eyal, he is an expert in creating habits, right? How to build technology so that you get people to come back over and over and over again. And I asked him, I was like, so what game do you play? He's like, oh, I don't touch the stuff. And I was like, wow, okay, so I feel really dismissed and had, yeah, completely. And his thing is like, well, eventually there should be like warning labels on them.
That'll work.
Yeah, I mean, look though, I mean, right, in New York City, not that long ago, all our clothes used to smell like smoke, and it doesn't anymore. We changed like so quickly. I think that they're seatbelts, cigarettes, like we are capable of making change extremely rapidly in our culture and society. And so if we start, I mean, you just quit Facebook.
I was
Brooke.
never really on it. It was a distant
don't deny.
screen. No, it really was. It was a distant, painful source of guilt. A crowded room that I'd never entered. But because I have a program, I had thousands of friends, and I didn't know any of them. And they were going to migrate it at the office and create one for my friends. And I never went. I went on once a month, panicked, and then fled. So people said, well, you were never on it anyway. But the thing is that I always felt guilty because people thought I was there and I wasn't responding to anybody. So I was glad to be rid of it.
Tortured her. But can I just say, like, I feel the need to say this, which is that Facebook also does wonderful things, right? Like they connect people to emergency services. There are communities being built on there every single day.
45% of Americans get their news from there.
Which is that part's not so good, I think. But I think it's about choosing, right? Like they want us to spend all our time there, all of it. They want you to get your news there. They want you to be connected there. They want you to play your games there. They want you to get your coupons there, all of it. But it's up to us to be like, I mean, right now we can't pay for it even if we wanted to. And these companies that we are essentially turning over our lives to, we're just kind of crossing our fingers and saying, yeah, I hope they don't screw us. There's no regulation, very little. This country has the worst privacy laws anywhere. And I think we're at a point where not only do we need to say like our tech habits need to change, but the entire way that the economy is being built with them at the center of it needs to change. But I'll get off my high horse now.
So it was great to know that there were people here who did Bored and Brilliant a couple of years ago. And I hope that this part of the next 15 minutes, people want to say things, share things, ask, please come up. Or how do you do it? Stand up and I'll hand you this thing, or you can yell.
Manoush,
Yeah.
how are you going to manage your children's access to these devices?
I am so not special. I mean, it's more obvious to me every single day. We have a piece of paper on the refrigerator that says 30 minutes only on non-school days for the iPad. I mean,
How old are your kids?
they're 7 and 10, and the iPad is just the delight of their lives right now. And I'm trying to be, what are you playing? Trying to understand what they're getting out of it, those sorts of things. Or not feeling guilty when mommy has to make dinner. Yeah, play the iPad for 20 minutes, right? And that's going to be okay. But it's hard. It is really, really hard. I mean, I went through a phase where I didn't let them play any games, but I did let them watch movies because at least I felt there was a progression of time and a narrative that was happening, and there wasn't that falling down the rabbit hole and looking up and being like that dazed sense of like, is it still light outside, which seems to happen when they go on the iPad. I will take heart. I have a neighbor. She's 14, and we were just chatting the other day, and she told me that on weekends she puts her phone away because she thinks only losers are posting all weekend long. And I was like, oh, well, maybe this is what the new cool is gonna be. I had a super big argument with David Pogue, the tech reviewer. I was like, I think in 5 years it's gonna be totally not cool to be at a party taking photos, and he just, you're so wrong. I was like, I don't know. This generation of kids has grown up with parents who can't put their phone down, and they don't like it. Yeah. They give me a really hard time. Mom, put your phone away, So maybe that's what we're going to see. It's
Maybe
gonna be
they'll
interesting.
react against us. That does work.
Wow, that never happens that the next generation rebels.
Anyone else? You?
I really don't need one.
Oh, okay. Go on. And then you. Here, you can hold that from me.
So, what advice would you give to digital natives that really grew up in that age that are trying to quit electronics, trying to quit social media?
Yeah, well, take the challenge. Thanks, Brooke. But it was interesting. I had a lot of professors who brought the challenge, the original one, into their classrooms, and many of them said that this was something that the students in their class had been talking about, that it was something that they sensed, but by codifying it and giving them something very specific and doing it communally made a really big difference. And to me, that was what was so exciting about the project. I mean, you can do anything on demand right now, but to have 20,000 people wake up every morning and decide to make a small behavior change and then report back about it was super exciting. So, okay, I'm going to be super specific. What kind of phone do you have? Oh, you have an Android one. Okay, so Break Free is the app that we partnered with for Android, and Moment is the other one that you can try. And there are people doing this right now, thousands of people trying to change their habits. But I would say don't be discouraged if the numbers don't go down. Because what I learned, so when we did the original project, the numbers that we got back was that our group cumulatively, don't laugh, shaved 6 minutes off of their time. And I was really upset. I mean, I was like, well, we suck. Like, what did we achieve? But I went back to the neuroscientists and the cognitive psychologists, and I said to them, I was like, I think we failed. And they laughed. They were like, do you know how hard it is to change people's habits in a week, much less? what they pointed to another number that we came back to, which was that 90% of the people felt that they had more control and power over their smartphones, and 70% felt that they just had more time to think. And they were like, believing that you can make change is the first step to making change. And so that was really like, I'll live with that. And I also have really cool stories. Like, can I tell my story about Vanessa? Oh my God. Vanessa, I got this letter from this woman written in like beautiful turquoise ink. And it was gorgeous. And she did the Bored and Brilliant project 2 years ago. She and her partner were splitting up at the time. She had to decide whether to sell her farm, do something new with her life. And she did the project and then decided to not only keep the farm, but to rename it, called Make Time Farm. And now, isn't that cool? And now once a month, it's in Wisconsin, you can go. Once a month, she opens it up to the community and invites people to come and do some of the challenges. She has a big basket where you can put your smartphone if you want. You can bring your sewing machine. You can take a nap. So she has sort of decided that this is something that she wants to do with her community, which is kind of awesome and amazing.
Hi. I guess my question's both about the hardware and the software aspect of it. 2 years ago, a couple years ago actually, I went away for 2 weeks. I didn't bring my phone, and for 2 weeks I felt these like phantom vibrations and like the muscle memory of like reaching in my pocket. So is that a real thing, or is it just me being crazy?
That is a real thing.
You felt your phone vibrating even when it was turned off?
Yeah, and it was my stomach rumbling, and I thought it was my phone, which is super embarrassing. It happens to me all the time. No, like, that's a real thing. It's like the pattern of self-interruption, same sort of thing, that lots of times it is your phone, right? And so you start to not recognize other bodily functions because your phone has taken over. Totally, did they go away after the end of 2 weeks?
I got home, and I got my phone.
So one of the challenges is to keep your phone off your body, and that might help, I think. Okay. Yeah, if you know it's in your bag, then you're like, oh, I need to, like, I'm having a spasm or something. I don't know. It's real.
You want to pass the phone back to
I would say I'm kind of at the other end of the spectrum.
Yeah.
I have a Facebook, but I've never posted on it. I have an Instagram, and I don't have any followers. I don't watch TV. I don't do any of this. And it's very isolatory. So everyone is pushing for this. But when you get to that stage and you get to that point, you can feel very lonely. So what would you say to that?
Yeah, so I am very clear in the book that this is not a detox. I don't think that's the answer. I don't think it's a binary on or off. These tools are here to stay, and they are wonderful, and they do connect people. The majority of the population...
It's not something that I did, like, detoxed. It's just I never liked it. So
you never liked it.
I never got
so it's
into
not
it.
something that you're even into.
I never was into it. I just never...
It feels isolated. So it's the opposite problem. You're thinking, if everyone is connecting this way...
Why am I not connecting this way? Why am I not part of this?
I'm just going back to the book. There's many people say in the book, and I'm not altogether sure it's true in every case. Like, if you have this phantom limb thing, it isn't just a question of will. You may need to do more to disconnect from that so that you can feel that you're not a cyborg, But because we are. Now, for you, you've made, unless you're, and you may have, a kind of phobia about some of this technology. I do, but if you just hate it, then you have made a trade-off, because that is how we communicate now. If the isolation becomes, if your dislike or aversion to the technology, which is understandable, is sufficient so that you can stand some isolation, then go ahead. But ultimately, that's your calculation. There are easy ways to dip your toe in, but that is purely your choice.
I would also add, though, that the researchers I've spoken to say the healthiest users of social media are the ones that use it to make dates to meet people in real life. So there are, there are ones where you don't have to bare your soul or put yourself out there. Like just know what's going on in real life and connect with people that way. So it's finding what works for you. I think that's great that you are not feeling like you have to.
I don't know if that mic is all that good, but do you want to pass it to that? It's on?
So I'm totally sold, at least on the spirit of it, and like wish all of these things sort of prosper, and but I worry that it might follow the kind of like Whole Foods trajectory of becoming the next way that like affluent, educated people separate themselves from not affluent, not educated people, and that now it's not that we eat like more ethical food, but it's that we have control of our minds while other people don't, and the Waldorf school kind of illustrates that happening at the top. But how do you suggest someone like, how do you suggest people both adopt these ideas but also do so in an inclusive way that isn't a kind of class signal, status signal? Which
That is such a good point, because as we know, with all of these technologies, we pay for them not with money but with our time. And so if it's like, how do you opt out of the ads? You upgrade to something so you don't have to see them. But if you are, if it's a financial burden, then what do? You have to pay with your time, right? That makes total, absolute sense to me, which is why I think there has to be a collective element to it. I think it's, both. On the one hand, it's about finding your personal fit. And if you can, as you say, afford with your time and your livelihood to adopt these sorts of habits, that's great. But what there needs to be is the collective pushback on the way that the entire business models have been set up. I don't know that we can do that today.
Conversation.
Yeah.
Just in terms of the conversation, like, so much of what's convincing about your thesis to me is how it's premised on all of these great researchers. But just from having been a teacher, if I tried to sell a lifestyle decision based on its like research merits, the students who I recall would not have really cared and may have even been like either maybe would have been repelled by that type of
Oh, trust me, if I was doing a presentation for like teenagers, it would be completely different. You're at the Strand, so you get the research part. But absolutely agreed. And I think there was a lot of resistance to, teenagers were like, what? You want me to not take, like I said, not take photos for an entire day? But I think that there is sort of there's a collective feeling that something doesn't feel good about this, right? And so there's safety in numbers by doing it as a group. That's what we found out with the classrooms, that being able to share the stories made all the difference. And I should add that in the book, not only is there the research, but there are the stories of listeners peppered throughout the whole thing. Like this guy, Liam, who on Delete That App Day, he just like went hog wild. He deleted every social media app off his phone. He's like, I'm an extremist by nature. They're off my phone. And he got back in touch last week. And we were like, so how'd it go? He's like, they've stayed off my phone for 2 years. And it's not that he quit social media. He just decided that it wasn't working for him, because 9 times out of 10, he said he'd go online and feel shitty about his life. And that wasn't, he decided he liked how it felt. So I think if we can have an honest conversation about how these things make us feel, or when they are useful as tools and when they are simply excessive, and that we have kids starting to understand the business models, the neuroscience behind it, sort of an interdisciplinary model of talking about this stuff seems extremely important to me. And I've been working with a science teacher, actually, to sort of think through what would a curriculum look like here. Because these kids know how to use computers. Like, that's not the issue. Like, yes, they're going to learn how to code. They gravitate towards this stuff. But what they need to be taught is self-regulation and an understanding of the powerful societal and cultural effects that they can have at a much earlier age, something I didn't have to learn when I was 12. No way. But we're giving them these tools or asking them to use these tools and not explaining to them what the potential consequences are or personal choices that they're being asked to make.
The thing that occurred to me after a while is that these challenges weren't supposed to be permanent. You were just supposed to experience them and see what you could learn from them, not necessarily apply any of them to your life later. It was simply, how did that feel? How was that different? Did something get let through? These were like tests more than they were prescriptions for how to live your life. And I think, even if you're dealing with kids, you're saying, observe how this feels. Don't have to incorporate not having this app on your phone anymore or never taking pictures. Or it was just a way to sort of explore where your tender zones were and where they weren't. Any others? Yes.
I think I want to better understand why you think this era is so different and why this isn't just kind of an innate, as you said, we're all trying to escape this awful feeling of boredom. We've done it with television, with radio, with madrigals, with poetry, for forever probably. So is this so different?
I asked that question too, because, as a journalist, I was like, you look for patterns and you find them often. What does seem to be different now, and I'm quite convinced of this, is that we're at an age where it is being, when you were on the phone, or when I was on the phone talking to a friend for 3 hours at a time on a Tuesday night when I was 12, the phone, I could hang up the phone and walk away. Now, my phone is constantly being updated to attract my attention, to change, to personalize in a way that we've never seen before. It knows me better than anyone else in my life. It knows where I was before I got here. It has a good guess of where I'm going to go after I leave here. It knows who's most important in my life. It knows what I hate. It knows everything, and it can change in order to have me use it more. That is unprecedented. And as many of the experts I spoke to, what we're looking for, Ellen Ullman, my God, her book just came out. If you're into this stuff, Life in Code, it's great. And she's like, we've had all these human emotions for millennia, but it's just the last 20 years that the internet has been around. And what we're seeing is it's changed. I mean, that's what, for me, why I wanted to do this show, is that to see how technology has changed the way we find romance, the way we parent, the way we get to work, the way we do everything has changed in this really short, quick amount of time. So to me, it's very, very different. I mean, Doug, I'm sorry, I have so many wonderful people to footnote. Doug Rushkoff, who's like, yeah, what's an Uber driver doing? It's training the robots to take their job 5 years from now. So we're at this sort of, I think, crucial moment where before everything sort of solidifies and changes, we can still say, no, let's hang on, all of us users, we want to have a say here too. That's where I sort of feel.
Last question.
So,
Okay. 3 more questions. Oh, 2 more questions. Okay. We've gone. You first.
sorry.
Go ahead.
So this isn't really a question, but sort
who
of
has the,
thinking
mic?
out
Sorry.
loud.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Is that these steps are sort of making it so that we're, instead of being led all the time, that we're doing some of our own leading of thought, of our lives, of how we want to go, rather than our machines telling us what we want to do.
Yes.
Making our own decisions.
Precisely. Autonomy, turning them back into tools rather than taskmasters. I mean, that was how a lot of people described their feeling about their phone, was that that it was like had turned into like a binky for them, like their pacifier. The minute they needed anything, I'm bored, I'm hungry, and the phone's like, I'm here, And so we've lost the ability to self-soothe, essentially.
Or like a baby.
Or like it's the baby.
It's crying, and you must
you need to check me. I have notifications. Yeah, I don't know. Where was
This isn't a question. I just wanted
Yeah.
to share some anecdotes.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily contrary to what you're saying. It's anyway. So since November of
Yeah.
last year, my Facebook network has really refined itself so that the people I found out, the people who liked my posts and the people who I like most, turned out to be people from my high school, my year. And so this actually led to, when we had a reunion earlier this year, many of us who were virtual friends becoming real friends because of the connection of our common interest and activism and all of that. So I think that actually, just so you know, I've had friendships that are formed where we actually had conversations on the phone that we scheduled. So there is a positive side because it actually helps you feel connected and find your tribe, in a way that technology is unique to technology and you wouldn't have been able to do otherwise.
Oh, I
So I just want to
totally agree. Absolutely. I'm going to get through the middle school process thanks to the internet and all the support groups and parents there are in New York City that are going to help me through it. No doubt. But I think we also need to critique this stuff a little bit more carefully as well. That's great. That's so amazing too.
Thank you.
Yeah,
so
thanks
much.
everybody. This was great.